Business Finance Chapter 7. In Chapter 7, we look at stock valuation and cash flows for stockholders. So if we own a share of stock as an individual, we receive cash in one of two ways. We can receive dividends from the company, or we can sell our shares to another investor or back to the company. Then we receive cash when we sell it or cash when we receive dividends. As with bonds, the price of the stock is the present value of these expected cash flows. So dividends are our regular cash income, and then selling is a capital gain from what we invested. Unlike bonds, the price of stock is not as easy to calculate the present value of these expected cash flows, where with stock we have a coupon rate and a par value. It's easier to tell what the expected cash flows for a bond are than what future dividends are going to be for a company. If we're just looking at a one-time example, so in this example, we're thinking of purchasing the stock of a company, Moore Oil Incorporated. We expect this company to pay $2 dividend in 1 year, and we believe that we can sell the stock for $14 at that time. If we require a return of 20% on our investment, what is the maximum we're willing to pay? So we have this calculation for the present value of expected cash flows, where D is our dividend expected in 1 year, 20% is our rate of return, and the payment one is, or the value of the stock in 1 year is $14 when we expect to sell it. So when we're looking at this, the future present value of those expected cash flows in 1 year equals $13.33. So we would expect to pay $13.33 for a stock that we could sell later for $14 at a 20% return and get a $2 dividend on. What happens when we extend that beyond one period? What if we decided to hold on to the stock for 2 years? Then we have the first dividend is $2. We assume dividends grow every year. So we assume that because the dividend grew, that then the price of the stock will also grow. And so the cash flows from that future dividend and from the future price flow, and then we discount those back. The present value of those future cash flows is still $13.33. What if we take it to 3 periods? What if we decide to hold the stock for 3 years? Then looking at the dividend growth, where in year 1 it would be $2, in year 2 it would be $2.10, then in year 3 we would project it to be $2.20.5, and the value of that stock that we could sell it for in 3 years would be $15.43.5. So the future value then of those cash flows being $17.64. So how much would we be willing to pay? And it's still $13.33. So the value of the stock is the present value of all of the future dividends and anything that we would get from selling it at the end. So that capital gain that we get from selling it at the end of its growth. We can also use the calculator, scientific calculator, or a financial calculator to enter what those cash flows are. And we could continue to push that back to when we would sell that stock. The stock value, as I said earlier, is just the present value of all expected future dividends. So how do we predict then what those future dividends are going to be. Because the stock value is the present value of dividends, the calculation then is the present value of the sum of all dividends through infinity. First, we have dividend 1 plus dividend 2 plus dividend 3 plus dividend 4 plus dividend to infinity for the time. So how can we estimate what all future dividend payments will be? We use different formulas. So the first case is a constant dividend or zero growth formula. This is when a firm is stated that they are going to pay a constant dividend forever and they don't plan on changing the dividend. This is very similar to the what preferred stock gives you, where there's a defined dividend or a stated dividend. In that case, the price is computed using the perpetuity formula that we saw in Chapter 5. The next way to estimate dividends is with the constant dividend growth formula. The constant dividend growth formula assumes that the firm will increase the dividend by a constant percent every period. The supernormal growth formula assumes that dividend growth is not consistent initially, but it will become consistent eventually. So even if a firm is to grow quickly in the first couple of years, the supernormal growth formula assumes that at some point they're going to become a constant growth formula. For a zero growth firm, we expect the dividends at regular intervals forever, which makes it a perpetuity. So in this example, suppose, which then makes the present value of a stock or the price of a stock, dividends divided by the rate. So suppose stock is expected to pay a 50-cent dividend every quarter, and our required rate of return is 10% with quarterly compounding. Then what is our price? So our dividend is 50 cents, and our required rate of return is 10% divided by 4 for the quarterly compounding. That gives us a stock price of $20 or today's value. If we're looking at a constant growth rate, we assume that dividends are expected to grow forever at a constant rate of G. So dividend 1 equals the dividend just paid times 1 plus the growth rate to the time. And then dividend 2 is the dividend just paid times 1 plus the growth rate to 2. And so forth. So every year we calculate the dividends. So let's look at an example for that. So we have a $2 dividend and a constant growth rate of 6%. Therefore, dividend 0 is $2. Our next expected dividend, given that 6% growth rate, is $2.12. The dividend expected in the period after that is $2.25. And the dividend after that is $2.38. So it's the dividend just paid times 1 plus the growth rate. The dividend growth model is also called the Gordon growth model, where we have 1 plus the growth rate to the time divided by 1 plus the return to the power of time, that we can calculate dividends off into any percent of time. So this dividend growth model, so our current price of a stock as its dividend next period divided by the discount rate less the dividend growth model. So let's look at an example of the dividend growth model. So suppose our company just paid a dividend of 50 cents. It is expected to increase its dividend by 2% per year. If the market requires a return of 15% on assets of this type, how much should the stock be selling for? So we have our dividend of 50 cents, a rate or growth rate of 2%, and a rate of return of 15%. So the price of our stock is dividend times 1 plus the growth rate divided by the required rate of return minus the growth rate. So you can see here, 50 cents times 1 plus the growth rate of 2% divided by the required return of 15% minus the growth rate of 2% gives us a stock price of $3.92. So let's look at another example. In this example, we have a company that's expected to pay $2 dividend in 1 year. If the dividend is expected to grow at 5% per year and our required return is 20%, what is the price? So in 1 year, that price is $13.33. The stock price sensitivity to dividend growth. As the dividend growth rate increases, the stock price increases. And the stock price sensitivity to required rate of return. So as the required rate of return increases, the stock price decreases. So when we're looking at that dividend growth rate. So let's look at another example. So we have Gordon Growth Company that's expected to pay a dividend of $4 next year, and dividends are expected to grow at 6% per year. The required return is 16%. So what is our current price? So $4 divided by the rate minus our growth gives us a price of $40. What is our price expected to be in year 4? Well, in that case, we need to we're looking for the price in year 4, so 4 periods. So we have the dividend, 1 plus the growth to the power of their periods divided by our rate minus our growth. So we would take 4 times 1 plus the growth of 6%. That gives us a price of $50.50. That's assuming constant dividend growth every year of 6%. What is the implied return given the change in price during the 4th year period? So the price grows at the same exact rate as dividends. If we look at $50.50 and equaling 40 times 1 plus the return to 4, we get a return of 6%. Or if we put it into our calculator and we're looking for the return, we find that the price grows at the same exact rate as dividends. Now, these are the conditions or the assumptions of that constant growth dividend model. 1, that the dividend is expected to grow forever at the same exact growth rate. That the stock price is expected to grow forever at that same exact growth rate. That the expected dividend yield is constant. That the expected capital gains yield is constant and equals the growth yield. Our expected total return must be greater than the growth factor. So the only way that the constant growth model conditions formula works is if our expected total return is higher than the growth rate. If the growth rate extends beyond the required rate of return, then we would get a negative number. The expected total return equals the expected dividend yield plus the expected growth rate. So all of these assumptions are made with the constant growth model.